Hi, Audra. It's so nice to see you. Thanks for coming here and agreeing to chat with me today. How are
You
you
bet.
doing?
Hi, Cynthia.
So I just wanted to, you're such an interesting person, and what you're doing is really in line with a lot of the clients that I work with, and also just my own values and interests. And it's funny because even like when I do a passion project, it kind of aligns with some of the
Yeah.
things that you're up to. And I like aspire to be like you, but I'm not
Thank
there. So
you.
I just am really grateful that you're agreeing to chat with me. And I met you through our mutual friend, Christy, who runs the Good Food Fest. And I was
Right.
wondering, well, basically, your career journey in combination with like the gardening, food, and home life really resonates deeply with me. And I was wondering if you could share about how you transitioned from teaching, or just a little bit about your story and into
Sure.
creating Life at the Nest, which is the business
Sure.
that you are running, and
Mhm.
what inspired this. So yeah, would love to
Sure.
hear that.
All right. Well, thanks. Well, I'm going to go back to college first and share with you that part of it because that had a huge influence on it at a time when I didn't think it would. I imagined a work-life balance when I went into college to become a teacher, where I would be able to be a teacher and raise children. What an ideal setup would that be, right? I can be at work when they're at school and I'd have off when they were. The reality is that when you have babies, that doesn't work. And when we had the first baby, I realized there was no way I was going to be able to let go and put my child in daycare to go off and teach other people's children. And I just wasn't comfortable with it. I wanted to be their primary teacher. So I think a lot of Life at the Nest started with the decision that we made as a couple to put my career on pause and become a single income family in a world full of double income families. That meant a lot of sacrifices. And it pushed me back to my roots. Frugality is a part of my upbringing. So as we embraced a DIY lifestyle to live frugally so that we could afford for me to be the primary teacher for our children, nothing is more frugal than growing your own food, canning your own food, and cooking from scratch. So
If
that's
you
what we
know what you're
did.
doing.
If you know what you're doing. And I fortunately had a lot of experience in my upbringing with this. I wanted to control the quality of the ingredients that we used. Our eldest son became very sick at a young age with a complex immune disease. And we found more control over food source by doing it this way. And of course, the internet is barely a thing at this point. So I was just going back to my roots, going back to what my grandmothers and my mother and the Amish family next door taught me, and digging through cookbooks to try to find ways to cook from scratch. And then we went on to buy a house that needed massive renovation because that's all we could afford. So we worked together with our children along our side, replacing windows and scraping flooring, and DIY became our classroom. And they joined us all through the process, which was great.
And how many kids do you have again? Remind.
We have five. I
Okay.
gave birth to four of them, and then we adopted another one when she lost her mother. So, yeah, there are five here. And four of them are still back with us, even though they're in their 20s. We have four back hanging out with us, which is a lot of fun, extending the party.
Yeah, that says a lot about you too. That's another
Pretty
reason that
comfy, I guess.
I'm taking notes. And is there anything else you wanted to share about that? I mean, I'd love to hear, you said that your neighbor, you were among Amish farmers, and then your
Mhm.
grandmothers. Is there anything specific you wanted to share about those? Because I know that you've talked a lot about them both.
Sure. I think generations flip flop. Mothers who had women who had mothers who worked tend to want to be home. And I think that women who had mothers that were home tend to want to work. So the generations can flip flop from time to time. My mother worked and we needed it. And we were a family of, middle class family with average income. We needed that income. Luckily, I wasn't a latchkey kid in a generation of latchkey kids because I had this Amish farm next door and there were eight children in the family and they just treated me like the ninth. And I talk a lot about my Amish mom and people say, "Oh, were you Amish growing up?" No, I wasn't Amish growing up, but I lived in a neighborhood surrounded by Amish, and this family just took me in, and I spent my summers there. So I learned the value of hard work, and I learned about cooking from scratch, and I learned about raising your own food. And I saw this family that had this common goal,
Mhm.
and they worked together toward it every day. And I knew that in some way I wanted to recreate that with my family when I got the chance to do so. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was as clear when I was 12
Right,
as it
right,
was
right.
later, but it certainly came back that that's what I wanted.
It's funny because I relate to that story a lot in that my parents were positioned among farmers and I spent a lot of time with my elderly neighbors. And
Hmm.
as a kid, I kind of like went into this dreamland of like my future and what was possible and all these
Right,
amazing things because I was surrounded by by nature's beauty, basically.
right,
And all
right.
of this like older wisdom, I feel like. And as an adult, I find myself being more like drawn back to that time in a sense
Hmm.
of like that being the goal versus
That's
me
right.
being in that and looking outward for the world to, take me somewhere special. I
Right.
feel like going back and seeing those like small, simple moments as actually like the special and the beauty of the life. So,
Sure.
I
Sure.
don't know.
I mean, as an adult looking back, there are times when I wish that had I traveled more, had I seen more, maybe. But it wasn't affordable for us to travel, particularly with that many children in tow, and see the world in the way that I wanted to. But I would argue that we saw so much more of life by watching the small things that happened here. And we don't have a farm. We have an acre and a half, but we used every inch of it to grow food, plant orchard trees, to do the things that we wanted to do together with our children. And whenever they said, "We want to have this," we said, "Well, let's go build it. Let's figure out how to do it." And we taught them how to use tools and we did it together. I would argue that that is probably more valuable in terms of the connection that we created as a family.
yeah. And then all of your kids are probably really able-bodied and
Yeah, they're
confident.
like super capable kids. And
Yeah.
I marvel at the fact that they took what we taught them and then they just went for it and did it even more. And I watch them and think, wow, we only just planted some seeds, but they really took off and grew. It's pretty cool to watch.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you is because, I mean, there's so many things, but I saw a video and you were talking about setting the table and the importance of like table linens. And
Hmm.
it inspired me to get out my grandmother's linens that I had that I was
Yeah.
just like kind of, they were stowed
I
away. I
love
was like,
that.
oh, I'm not going to use them. And
Hmm.
it was just such a, I don't know, it was like a nice thing, just encouraging me to like kind of live in the moment instead of like waiting for something to happen that I don't know when it would happen. And
Right.
I would love to hear like, kind of why setting the table holds such significance for you and like how it
Hmm.
reflects or how it kind of leads into like your family life or anything that you'd want to share about that.
Sure. Well, I'm so glad that you brought this up because it is a tradition that I got from my mother-in-law who passed some years ago. And I adopted a lot of her traditions. She used a tablecloth, an actual tablecloth, and linen napkins at her table every day. And in their retirement, they became sheep farmers. In their mid
Wow.
60s, they bought an 80-acre farm and raised sheep. And they were lambing and doing all the work. They were out in the fields bringing in their own straw and hay in their 60s and 70s. And
Wow.
they actually went until their late 70s. It was impressive to me. But one thing that mom maintained was that when we came inside, we sat down together and ate, and she put linens at the table. Somehow that made it really special to have a linen napkin in your lap, and it slowed things down. Instead of the throwaway idea of paper plates and paper napkins, they used dishes and linens and made mealtime special. This brings a family together to discuss the day. And dining together is as much about connection as it is about calories. And I saw that. And even when we were just early dating, I saw that and thought, oh, I want to be a part of this.
It's something
I
special.
felt so welcomed at their table and encouraged to connect in a way that I didn't necessarily grow up with because I had two parents that worked. Not that they weren't loving and parents
Right.
who were connected with us, but it was very different to have that time together, 3 meals a day. As a parent, when scouts and choir and sports and all the other things started to consume our schedule, we had more meals on athletic fields and in cars than I was comfortable with. So every moment that we could capture that and continue to have the linen in your lap on a table with a beautiful tablecloth with some fresh flowers. It feels like mom and dad's spirit are here with us when we have that. I feel that connection to family in a way that I don't think anything else really does. So it's important to me.
I love that. And it reminds me of, so much of why I went to Europe. I went to Italy when I was like 20. I was fortunate
Hmm.
to go with one of my professors. And I was captivated by Italian culture in a way that I
Yeah,
really couldn't even understand at the time. But as time
sure.
goes on, I realized so much of it has to do with like how intentional they are about slowing down and enjoying
Yeah.
a meal together and valuing
Mhm.
family. And all of what you just said kind of translates to what I love about like, yes, the food's amazing too, but
Right.
it's also just the experience of it and just
Mhm.
enjoying that moment around the table with people. And
For
I,
real.
yeah, and I feel like sometimes I'm always trying to, get there again or have like wait for that special moment instead of just like bringing it to
Right.
today.
Right.
And so
Right.
yeah, what you shared is just like a good reminder that it's so easy to, kind of bring what you really desire right to the table every single day.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it kind of goes back to my comment about, do I wish that I had this jet set lifestyle of traveling around the world? Well, you can wish for that or you can create it. And we created it by cooking from scratch and spending time together. And we experience different cultures by making the food. We've learned how to make food from all around the world
oh yeah, I
by
remember you
bringing
sharing
that
that.
experience in. Yeah.
How did that happen with the food from all?
I just being bored with eating the same things all the time and wanting to mix it up. And I have a huge cookbook collection and just decided to start trying different things. And, I grew up eating kind of basic and simple food in the Amish community. They eat food that they grew, but it tends to be what's hyper local. And I thought, well, I can still cook from scratch. I can still teach my children how to cook, but we could expand. We could try other things. And as we went out to eat and tried other things, I thought, well, I could do this at home and I could do this with fresh ingredients. So off we went. And I wouldn't say that everything I tried was fantastic, but we learned to use different flavors. And now we have children who appreciate eating all kinds of cuisine, not just, the
Mhm.
standard things that you would cook for your child. My children were never allowed to just be picky eaters who only ate these couple of things. They had to try everything. And
Uh-huh.
now they have a really cool appreciation for different kinds of cuisine because of that.
And I guess
So,
it probably also taught you how to blend different kinds of culture into like your own
sure,
special meals that, uh,
sure.
yeah, mix and
Yeah.
match things. So
Hmm.
my next question was actually kind of related to what we're just talking about. So it says your way of life seems to resonate with a growing cultural desire for mindfulness, embracing nature, and reviving
Hmm.
traditional practices. How do you think
Hmm.
incorporating these practices can benefit us in our daily lives? So we kind of talked about that, but if there's anything else you want to share.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love this question because I am thrilled to see a shift from the go, go, go lifestyle where families were just running, 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 going. And I'm seeing people, and maybe COVID had a role in this. Maybe there was an opportunity for families to slow down and go, whoa, what are we doing? We can connect with each other. And it really just warms my heart to see that. That the Unfortunately, if you had a generation shift where you didn't have parents who taught you those things,
Mhm.
how are you going to figure it out? Well, ironically, one of the most modern forms of connection, social media, has actually brought people back to their roots, which is wild. And it warms my heart. People are seeking and consuming knowledge at a rapid pace. And a lot of what they want is kind of back to the roots, basic understanding of how to cook and how to take care of their home. Well, the teacher in me wanted to help connect people, and I started teaching workshops in jam making and making your own holiday wreath from scratch instead of just going and buying one that's going to drop all of its needles in the first week from a store, going and cutting your own greens and making it, starting seeds from the garden. And the workshops are really, really popular. This, however, happened to come to a screeching halt because of COVID. No one wanted to come to a live class anymore. And it was my brother who said, here's a camera, start a YouTube channel, start social media. And I thought, I'm an old girl. Who's going to watch me? And it just grew. I couldn't believe it. I put videos out there and people said, I want more. So apparently, people want to learn the practices of saving money and creating connections and going back to their roots. And I happen to have some experience that I could share. I don't pretend to be an expert. I'm just sharing what it is that I know and what has worked for us. And it resonates with people. So we can grow and preserve food and we can spend more time together and spend less money. That's a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm doing it right if that's what we're sharing.
Are you doing workshops now then that are online?
So I'm no longer doing live workshops, but I just find it's hard enough to keep up with family and put videos out. Sometimes putting content out is, I mean, some people make it look really, really easy. I will be I'll be honest with you. It's very difficult for me because I'm a teacher. I resonate with a live audience, but I push videos out and sometimes it's hard. And I'm also a really big critic of myself.
Mhm.
So the process of editing a video and putting it out, I want to remake it, I want to redo it, but I've just learned to just put it out there
Mhm.
because people need the information and they're probably not judging as much as I am.
Right.
Um, but it's something people want. So that's how Life at the Nest began. People would come to our home and ask us questions and say, "How did you build that? How did you do that?" I'm like, well, we didn't have a plan. We just built these cubbies for our kids to stay organized. And friends were like, "Can we have the plans?" Well, there weren't any plans. We were just winging it and putting it together, slap some paint on it, and it became a functional, very useful tool in our house. So we started sharing it online as a blog, and then it grew to being social media.
So now people can go to your YouTube channel to watch different tutorials. They can go to your social media, which I'll include all these links.
Sure. Yeah.
And then also your website where you're having different blog categories based on
Right. Right.
basically how they can learn from you today.
Yeah, and the value I think in it is that most of my content is timeless. It's not as if I mean it's seasonal, but it's not as if what I'm sharing is only relevant for 2024. I mean, some of the stuff I've been doing, making jam, I've been doing since I was a young child in the 70s and 80s. So it's timeless. So you can go back and watch old videos. There's a lot of content there that probably would be relevant today. Now it's seasonal. I don't, people ask me all the time, they want to make jam and do you have a jam recipe? I'm like, it's November, y'all. Unless you froze fresh fruit, we're not getting anything available right now to make jam. So I do put some things in the freezer and then make it later. But other than that, it's pretty seasonal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I love too, because it's like
Mhm.
rhythmic and
Sure.
it's just fun to kind of learn about how all of that flows together. I feel like I would love to
Mhm.
have a Life at the Nest book with
Oh,
all your things.
oh.
Yeah.
It's on my mind. I just haven't put it together yet.
Yeah, because you already have all of the content probably. I wondered,
Mhm.
could you share the story about the hen? This is kind of like I didn't ask you about this, but when we
Mm.
worked on your logo, you told me this like sweet story about the hen that you wanted to include in your logo.
Mhm.
I just wondered if you could share that because I think it's really special. And
Okay, now you're gonna make me cry.
oh no, I'm sorry.
So that's okay. It's okay. It's a lovely story. It really is. But it was a very tough day for us. So the hen that is featured in my logo that you drew so beautifully for me is Bella. And Bella is was a Buff Orpington chicken that I had. And unfortunately, tragically, a fox came in on Easter morning and attacked all of our chickens. And we lost, I think we had 12 at the time, and we lost all of them except for Bella. And it was a horrible scene. And anybody who's ever raised chickens has probably had this moment. It's awful. And the children were still sleeping, and my husband and I went out, and there were just feathers everywhere and chickens, and we lost some of our ducks too. We're all gone. And I stood there and looked at this field and thought, we have to cover this up before the children come see it. I don't want to traumatize them. And from this pile of feathers, Bella stands up and starts limping toward me. And I thought, oh my
Oh,
gosh, one made it. And she looked so sad and so pathetic. And I scooped her up and I ran over to my husband, and her back was just open. And I thought, how in the world are we ever going to save this chicken? And this man says, don't worry about it. I'm going to stitch her back together. And we sat together with this chicken. And my mother-in-law, we built an addition on our house for my mother-in-law, and she lived with us for years. And we sat at her dining table, and with my sewing kit, he sewed this chicken back together and stitched her up. We put Neosporin on her, and we made her a little box inside the house, and there she sat. And she looked lonely and like she didn't have purpose. And of course, I'm imagining this. She probably is a chicken and maybe didn't feel lonely. I don't know, but I thought she did. So the next morning, the children and I went to our local feed store and we bought 6 or 7 baby chicks.
mhm.
And we brought them home and we put them underneath of Bella. And she mothered them like they were her own. She taught them how to go in and out of the coop and would herd them and take care of them. And that she restarted our flock and brought the next round of chickens up. So Bella was the perfect chicken in our mind. and,
Mhm.
and she was kind of a symbol for what it meant to rebuild after tragedy, and became the symbol for me about life at the nest, because our nest has always had chickens. And Bella was the leader of that for a long time.
Yeah, I love that. I like the story of
Yeah.
resilience too. And I'm sure
Yeah,
with farming and food and all of that, like there's always things that kind of happen that are unpredictable.
sure.
That you have to kind of
Yeah,
go from ground zero to restore in a way.
for
Um,
sure.
so
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk to you about a couple things that you grow, just food in general. And I was wondering if you
Mhm.
could share what your favorite food is to grow in your garden and why,
Okay.
if why it's your go-to. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of
Mhm.
them, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah, there are lots of favorites, but there are two for me that are just clear standouts, and it's tomatoes and strawberries. And the reason why I love tomatoes and strawberries are because I have never, ever purchased a tomato or a strawberry in a store that tasted like homegrown.
Mm.
So I can go to the store and I can get pretty fresh peas or green beans or lettuce and things like that, and they'll taste a lot like what you grow at home. But you will never find a store-bought tomato that tastes like one that you grow at home. And I have, like, I did a whole series of videos about how tomatoes are my Roman Empire. I mean, it really is that much of an addiction for me. I just won't eat one that doesn't come from a garden. They just taste different. There's also, maybe it's because they're both red. There's something about
I was
going out
gonna
there and
say,
seeing
maybe. Yeah,
that. And they
I'm
just
wondering.
jump out of the garden at you. You don't have to
Yeah,
search through green things to find green things. They're like, here I am, I'm ready to go.
yeah.
That I love. And having grown up next to this Amish farm, they kind of adopted me as the ninth child, and they folded me right into their day. My Amish mom was one of my best teachers. I mean, she was one of like the OG influencers of my life. And between milking cows and harvesting fruit and vegetable and selling produce at the farm stand, I mean, it was really like an idyllic childhood. And growing a garden and having food accessible like that just takes me, it just transports me right back to my childhood, to a time when growing food wasn't work. We were picking rocks out of the fields, like a horse drawn wagon
Mm-hmm.
where we would go, it would plow, and then we would take the wagon along, and the horses kind of just knew to go so many feet and pause, and we would throw rocks up into the wagon to get the rocks out of the field.
Mm-hmm.
We were singing, we were laughing, we were telling stories, and we were having fun doing a really crappy job. I mean,
Hard
picking
work.
rocks out of the dirt is hard work and kind of not fun, but to me, growing food transports me back to those moments of, I mean, that was connection. We got to know each other in a field, and it just transports me back to a really happy time in my life. So tomatoes and strawberries are a part of that. And we picked a lot of tomatoes as a child, like peach baskets and peach baskets on big
Oh,
wagons that
wow.
would go out in tractor trailer loads of tomatoes, or acres of tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
And it was hard work, but I loved it
Yeah.
because we did it together as a family.
So the tomato season is like what, 2 months long? Like harvesting tomatoes, but strawberries is like really short, right?
Yeah, strawberries is really short, and I just wish I could have a longer strawberry season, but it's one of those reasons why I freeze a million of them and I make jam, because I want to hold on to that flavor
That's
as
what I
long as
was
I
gonna
can.
ask. Yeah, what do you do
Mhm.
to preserve it? So you freeze a lot of them. Yeah.
We freeze a lot of them. I freeze strawberries. My kids make smoothies out of fresh fruit from our garden all throughout the year, and it's not the same as fresh, but it's fresh frozen. And if you're going to make a smoothie, why not have it be fresh fruit that it was a peak flavor when you put it in the freezer? So we do a lot of that. I do the same with tomatoes. I make a lot of sauce. I can whole tomatoes. So when we make pasta dishes, we have whole fresh tomatoes, whole canned fresh tomatoes to work from. The flavor's just different. And I freeze a lot of them too. You can take a tomato, a plum tomato,
Uh-huh.
take the core, take the stems out of the top of it, and just as it is, throw it in the freezer in a bag. When you take it out and defrost it, the skin slips right off, and you have a pretty fresh tomato to make sauce out of. It tastes pretty close to fresh. So I save as many of them as I can so I have it all year long, and I don't
Good.
have to buy sauce. Yeah, and tomatoes are cheap. They're cheap to grow. A pack of tomato seeds is like $1 or $2, and you can grow thousands of tomatoes out of that one pack of seeds.
Right. And they're
right?
pretty hardy too, I feel like. That's
Very,
one of the things
yeah,
I've had success with.
yeah,
And I don't have success with everything. So yeah.
yeah. No, tomatoes are pretty easy to grow. Tomatoes and strawberries, pretty easy to grow. And strawberries are the gift that just keeps giving because if you just let them go, they'll just keep producing year after year.
Mhm.
And yeah, so those are my two favorites.
Awesome. I was wondering
Yeah.
if you could also share about flowers, because I know flowers is like a really big part, cut flowers and just flowers in general is a really big part of your brand and
Oh
what you're
yeah.
doing. And if you had a favorite
Mhm.
flower.
So choosing a favorite flower is like choosing a favorite child, in my opinion. It's really hard to do because I love them all
Maybe
for different
five? No.
reasons. But I will say that I some of my favorites to grow are the things that give you that pack a real punch, like zinnias, sunflowers, peonies, and of course hydrangea. I mean, I have probably a dozen hydrangea bushes on this property
Wow.
and I absolutely love them. All of those are a big showy thing that pack a big punch. If you bring a handful of zinnias inside and put them in a vase, they will be bright, sunny, long lasting, and gorgeous for a long time compared to commercially, raised flowers. Peonies are one of my favorites because they bloom and then you could literally take a lawnmower and mow them down and they'll come back next year and be grateful for it. I mean, they're really, really easy to grow and they look gorgeous and they smell amazing. So I love them.
Is that what you do then? As soon as they're done blooming, you just mow them down?
I just cut them down. I cut them down to the greens and enjoy the greens. And at the end of the season, I cut them right off at the ground. But I had a friend who had them lining their sidewalk.
Mhm.
And they just, when they were done, they just mowed them down. And I was like, mowing them down? What are you doing to these peonies? I think that they came back stronger because of it. I think that they're almost
Wow.
indestructible. So yeah, and then you can divide them. You can dig them up and divide them and have more. And most of my peonies are divided from two or three original plants, and now we have hundreds. So
So
they're
what's your
really easy
trick
to
with
grow.
hydrangeas? Because every single time I cut my
Ah,
hydrangea to put in a bouquet, it looks good for
mhm.
about 12 hours and then it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah, so I have two tricks, and I worked in the florist industry for a little while. My sister-in-law was a very successful florist, and most of what I know about flowers I learned from her. So hydrangea is really, and a lot of other woody stem flowers are a little tricky, but hydrangea especially has like a sticky substance. As soon as you cut it, it starts to kind of heal the wound. So
okay.
there's this sappy, sticky substance that kind of seals like a resin around the bottom of the stem. Well,
Oh,
that just cuts off the water supply from getting into the flower.
okay.
So two ways that you can counter it. One is that you can take the flour and just dip it into alum. Alum powder, you can buy it in the spice aisle.
Okay.
And make a fresh cut, dip it in alum, and it blocks that sticky substance from forming so that it can take up water.
Okay.
That's
So
that's
that's the
an
easy.
easy way to do it.
Hmm.
Maybe more effective, the other method is if you have a meat tenderizer or a hammer, you just smash the end of the stem, especially
Oh,
the more woody stems on
yeah.
the hydrangea. I just did a video, I'm going to post this probably tomorrow about this, but I just take the end of the stems and I just literally
Oh, that's
mash them until the
perfect
stem
timing.
splits apart. The water is going to get inside of it. And yeah, so either of those will work and they will last a lot longer. I years ago did a side by side. I should do another one of a hydrangea that I cut and just put in water and one that I cut and dipped in alum. This
Okay.
one's wilty, this one's bright and beautiful.
Wow,
So
that's so
yeah,
fascinating. Yeah, I've been trying to figure it out
yeah,
for a while and I really
yeah,
wasn't looking it up, but I'm just like, what is happening? I don't understand.
yeah, yeah,
So thank you for that. I
yeah,
love all
that's,
those flowers as well. Peonies are probably my favorite, but because they're so short-lived, I also
I
love
know.
echinacea. I just think that they're really pretty and they remind me.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I also wondered before well, if I want to make sure you get to share everything you wanted to about your own brand. So if there's anything else
Hmm.
you want to add there, let me know because I feel like I didn't do it justice of to sharing all that you do and like how people can get in touch with you and everything. So.
Well, I mean, you can find my content on YouTube and TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and this gorgeous website that you built for me, which allows me to put together a blog. And honestly, that's where it started for me. I'm a storyteller. You talked about flowers, and what I love about flowers takes me back to a connection with my grandfather who tended to flowers. So the blog gives me an opportunity to tell that story. To me, it's not enough just to teach people how to do things, but why? Why is it special to me? And
Mhm.
the blog site allows me to do that. And teaching in social media allows me to tell the story a little bit too. But consumers on social media, particularly TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, they have about a 30 second to a minute attention span on that, and then they're flipping to the next one. So that's a tough format for me. I'm
Yeah,
a teacher. YouTube is probably it's a more natural environment for me, as
sure.
well as the blog. I love writing. So yeah, I love the opportunity that this connection has allowed me to have without having to go. I was about to rent space
Mhm.
to open an actual workshop where people could come in and take classes and they could learn. And I was about to sign a lease in January of 2020. Can
That's
you
so
imagine?
amazing, the
Um,
timing of everything.
I actually chickened out and backed off, and then the world shut down, and I would have been in big trouble because I would have signed a lease for something I couldn't afford to have. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to have this digital way of sharing what it is that I love.
Mhm. Do you ever think about running retreats or like a day in person at your place, or just
I
curious?
think about it
My own
sometimes, and then
personal.
yeah, I think about it sometimes, and I think how much fun it would be to do. I used to do that when I worked at Wybrook Farm here in Chester County, and I had workshops there, and I did love having people come and do that. And I think about returning to it sometimes. I find that I'm juggling a lot with family and the business, and the videos make it look like it's really quick and easy, but there's a lot of ugly work behind the
Yeah.
scenes of pulling weeds and taking care of all these other things that I'm also doing so that you
Yeah.
can see this jar of jam and it
Yeah.
takes some time. So juggling the work-life balance has become it is hard for me, and I'm learning, but maybe I'm a little slow learning that part of it because it's
Yeah, I love
still
that.
it's
I
still a
saw
chore.
this hilarious reel on Instagram of this like beautiful angelic garden and this woman kind of frolicking around picking flowers. And then it was like there was like behind every content creator online is a husband doing a ton of work, like and
Right,
bleeped out some cursing and there,
right,
there's this guy like carrying a wheelbarrow, his pants are like falling
right,
down. It was just hilarious
right.
because it's
No,
true.
it's
Like
very, very
so much
accurate.
hard
And
work. Yeah.
I try not to just show the pretty side of things because it does take work to get that. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it isn't work. It's work I love, but it is work. And putting food on the table is, I grew up in a generation of kids who were latchkey kids, and we ate a lot of microwaved meals because our parents all worked. Putting food on the table when you actually have to harvest it, wash it, prepare it, cook it, and then serve it takes a lot longer. But
Hmm.
I wouldn't have it any other way. It just means
Right.
that my day is consumed with it sometimes. So,
Yeah. And I try
but I
to
love
show
it.
that in my daughter too. Like, cause she's
Mhm.
about to be 6, but I'm like already trying to show her the value of hard work because, and also just to appreciate it, like the story you told
Right.
about the stones. I love that because I think it just resonates. Like it can be hard when you're a kid, but when you look back on it, you see the beauty in it too.
Sure.
So I wanted
Sure.
to ask one final thing is just for someone
Mhm.
starting out on their journey, if they're thinking,
Ah.
considering
Mhm.
self-sufficiency and homesteading in general, what is
Mhm.
one piece of advice or like a physical tool that you would recommend to get started?
So my advice is to start small, first of all. I meet people every day who take on too much, get overwhelmed, and quit. And starting small and adding progressively is a really good idea. Our best example of this is how many fruit trees my husband bought when we moved here. And we had a garden to tend to and a lot of little children and a house to renovate. And we had all these fruit trees. And we forgot to prune them and take care of them. And they became overgrown, and some of them didn't make it. And that was a bummer. Now our children are older, we could probably take that on and add some more, but take it easy and take a little at a time. Master something, then
Mhm.
add. A favorite tool, you mean like a garden tool kind of a
Yeah,
thing?
it could be
Um,
anything or kitchen tool, whatever.
yeah. I think that my two favorite tools, my favorite garden tool is probably my hori hori knife. It's a knife that has a curved kind of a concave kind of a blade. I
Uh-huh.
can dig weeds out with it. I can loosen up the soil. I
Oh
can
yeah.
dig a hole to put a plug in really quick, and it fits in my back pocket. So I use I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
It's my favorite tool. That was a gift that my husband gave to me years ago, and I thought, what is this for? And I use it every day. My favorite inside tool, I'm like a huge fan of OXO kitchen scissors. I use kitchen scissors for everything. Cutting down chickens, I cut produce with it. I use scissors almost as much as I use knives.
Mhm.
And I throw them in the dishwasher and they come back out. I have two pair that I use all the time. So that's one of my favorite inside tools.
Are they just larger or just like
They're
extra?
larger, they're thick, they cut through anything. And we have like a really serious rule about scissors around here. There are fabric scissors that if you are caught cutting paper with, off with your head. It's bad news. And then we have kitchen scissors, which you can cut through wire. I mean, I use them as for doing florist work with wires and things like that. They're really sturdy, heavy duty scissors. OXO makes them and they're great. So we have different tools for different reasons. If you use it for the wrong reason, you're probably in trouble around here. You'll laugh if you see one of my children do it. The other ones will go, Mom is gonna get you because you can't use the wrong one. But yeah, those are probably two of my favorites off the top of my head that I love and use literally every day.
Okay, well, you have to share those links with me so I can put them in the.
I will. I
And
will.
well,
I
thank you
will.
so much for your time. This is so fun. I feel like I could ask you questions all day. That's why I was like, are you doing anything in person? Because I just really want to hang out with you and ask you.
Yeah.
But we can follow
Yeah.
along on all the great content that you have available online. And I just appreciate and value your time. So thanks, Audra.
Thank you. It's so great talking with you, Cynthia.